You know the moment before you do it. The phone is already in your hand. The familiar sequence of taps, so rehearsed it barely registers as a choice anymore. You open the app, scroll past the distractions, and there it is. The name, the profile, the small square image that hasn't changed in weeks, but somehow still demands to be checked. You pause for half a second, not because you're deciding, but because some part of you knows what comes next won't feel good. And then you tap anyway. This isn't the first time. It's not even the 10th. You've done this enough times that you've stopped counting, stopped pretending there's a reason that makes sense when you say it out loud. The behavior has become background noise, something that happens in the margins of your day when no one's watching and nothing else is demanding your attention. But here's what's strange. You don't expect to feel better when you do it. You don't open that profile thinking it will bring relief or clarity or anything resembling peace. You know somewhere beneath the surface that you'll close it feeling slightly worse than before, slightly heavier, slightly more tangled, and yet you keep looking. There's no announcement before it happens, no conscious moment where you decide today is the day to check in. It just occurs to you, the way thirst occurs to you, the way your hand moves toward your face when you're anxious without asking permission first. The behavior has embedded itself so deeply into your routine that it no longer feels like something you're doing. It feels like something that happens to you. A reflex without an injury. An itch that doesn't quite exist until you start scratching. You tell yourself it's curiosity. That's the most common explanation, the one that sounds reasonable enough not to examine too closely. You just want to see what they're up to, how they're doing, whether they've changed their picture or posted something new. It's harmless, you think? It's just information. But if it were truly curiosity, it would feel lighter. Curiosity doesn't leave a residue. Curiosity doesn't sit in your chest for 20 minutes after you've closed the app, replaying what you saw, what you didn't see, what it might mean that they posted that particular thing at that particular time. Maybe you tell yourself it's about closure, that seeing their life continue without you will somehow finalize the ending. Make it real in a way that the breakup itself didn't. But closure isn't something you find by watching someone's curated updates from a distance. Closure doesn't arrive through a screen. And if you're honest, really honest, you'll notice that each time you check, the need to check again doesn't decrease. It sharpens. The behavior doesn't close anything. It pries something open, just a little, just enough to keep the door from sealing completely. Sometimes you frame it as boredom. You were scrolling anyway, killing time, and their profile just happened to be there. But boredom doesn't explain the small spike of tension before you tap, or the way your attention narrows when the page loads, or the specific quality of the silence that follows. Boredom is passive. What you're doing is active, even if it doesn't feel that way. Even if it happens so quickly, you barely register it as a decision. You might say it's habit, and that's closer. Habits are behaviors that bypass the part of you that questions them. They slot into routines so seamlessly that they feel like nothing, like the natural order of things. But habits usually serve some function, even if it's not obvious. They reduce friction, they automate, they solve some small recurring problem. So if this is a habit, what problem is it solving? What recurring tension does it release? Because it does release something, doesn't it? Not satisfaction exactly, but a kind of pressure. A restlessness that builds when you haven't checked in a while. A low-grade static that doesn't have a name but has a direction. And the checking? It doesn't make the static disappear, but it gives it somewhere to go, for a moment. Here's what you're starting to notice, even if you haven't said it out loud yet. The checking doesn't calm anything. It doesn't settle you. What it does is sharpen something, a particular kind of awareness, a thread of attention that stays live even when everything else has gone quiet. It keeps the past from becoming past. It keeps a certain story from ending, not by rewriting it, but by refusing to stop reading. And that's where the real mechanism lives, the one you haven't questioned yet. Because what the behavior actually does, what it accomplishes beneath the surface, is keep the relationship emotionally active, not in the way that communication keeps something active, or even in the way that memory does. This is different. This is maintenance. You are maintaining a connection that no longer exists in reality by feeding it small, regular doses of attention. Every time you check, you are confirming that this person still occupies a specific place in your internal landscape. You are updating the file, refreshing the data, keeping the image current. And in doing so, you freeze time. Not literally, of course. Time continues, circumstances change. Both of you move through your lives in ways that have nothing to do with each other anymore. But emotionally, psychologically, you remain oriented toward a version of the past that refuses to recede. The relationship ended, but the emotional architecture it built hasn't been dismantled. It's still standing. You're still walking through it. And the checking, the repeated, almost compulsive checking, is what keeps the lights on. There's something else happening too, something quieter but just as significant. The behavior creates the illusion of connection without the risk of contact. You get proximity, visual, informational, without exposure. You get to stay adjacent to their life without having to be in it, without the vulnerability that actual interaction would require. It's connection at a distance, controlled, one-sided, entirely on your terms. And because it's controlled, it feels safer than the alternative. But here's the part most people miss. And once you see it, the behavior stops looking harmless. This isn't about your ex. Not really. It's about regulating something inside you that hasn't found another way to be regulated. The checking serves a function that has almost nothing to do with them and everything to do with what happens when you don't check. When you don't look, something rises, something uncomfortable, something you've learned to interrupt before it fully arrives. Because stopping, actually stopping, would mean something. It would mean accepting a version of reality that doesn't get updated. It would mean living with uncertainty, with gaps in the narrative, with the knowledge that things are happening in their life that you will never know about, that were never yours to know about in the first place. It would mean letting the story lose detail, letting it blur, letting it become less sharp, less immediate, less present. And that feels unbearable in a way that's hard to explain. Not because you want them back, necessarily. Not because you're still in love, necessarily. But because the alternative, the emotional silence that comes when you stop checking, is a kind of nothingness that your mind hasn't learned to tolerate yet. The relationship ending created a void, a sudden absence of structure, and the checking is how you've been managing that void, not by filling it, but by hovering at its edge, keeping it visible, keeping it defined. The urge isn't longing, not exactly. It's resistance. Resistance to letting the space they occupied simply be empty. Resistance to allowing uncertainty to exist without trying to resolve it. Resistance to the specific quality of grief that only arrives when you stop trying to control the narrative. So the behavior survives because it prevents something harder. It keeps you from having to feel the full weight of what it means to no longer have access to someone who once felt essential. It delays the moment when you have to recalibrate your emotional center of gravity without them on the map. And every time you check, you delay it a little longer. Here's what it's really doing to you. Every time you return to that profile, you are training your attention to stay oriented toward what's gone. You are reinforcing a pattern where emotional energy flows backward instead of forward. You're not moving through the ending, you're circling it, studying it, keeping it under surveillance. And the more you do this, the more your mind treats the past as something that still requires monitoring, as though it's a live situation instead of a closed one. This prevents emotional recalibration. Your system can't fully adjust to the new reality because you keep feeding it updates from the old one. It's like trying to adjust to a new time zone while constantly checking the clock back home. The adjustment never completes. The disorientation never fully resolves. And here's the cost that's hardest to see. It makes moving on feel abstract. Not impossible, but theoretical. Something other people do. Something you'll do eventually, later, when the time is right. But the time never feels right, because the behavior itself creates the conditions that make moving on feel distant and unclear. You're standing in your own way, but from the inside, it just feels like standing still. The profile becomes a place you return to, not because it offers anything, but because not returning would require you to face what you've been avoiding: the silence, the uncertainty, the reality that they are living a life that has nothing to do with you, and that this is not a problem to solve. It's a fact to absorb, and you're not ready to absorb it. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. So you keep checking. Not because it helps. Not because it brings you closer to anything real, but because it gives you something to do with the part of you that hasn't learned to let go yet. It gives the discomfort a destination. It keeps the question open just enough that you don't have to answer it. But here's what you're starting to realize, whether you wanted to or not. This isn't about them anymore. It hasn't been for a while. It's about what you've been avoiding inside yourself. The empty space, the unanswered question, the feeling that arrives when you finally stop looking. The behavior has become a shield, but it's also a cage. And you've been inside it so long you've forgotten what it feels like to not be watching. You know this doesn't end with one more check. You know the next time won't bring anything the last 50 didn't. You know the behavior is costing you something, even if you can't name it yet. But knowing doesn't make it stop. And that's the part that sits with you now in the quiet, after you've closed the app and put the phone down and tried to return to whatever you were doing before. The realization that you're not checking their profile to learn something about them. You're checking it to avoid learning something about yourself.